What the fuck? What the shit? I don't release 4 episodes of a show within 1 year. That can't be right. Sorry guys, joking about hiatuses is it's the only material I got. Well actually, we are entering the 3rd exciting saga of the series. See, we had the peaked audio saga.
This is gonna be a video with why are my levels so fucking high?
The mustache saga. And now we're on the wet hair after a shower saga. The story is very important. I hope you're keeping up with it. You can't watch these in any order. You have to watch them all. Now that everyone's guaranteed to be gone, pull up my list. We're gonna review everything. Last time I did a bunch of movies from our movie night, and there's a couple of those mixed in here, but some that aren't from movie night too. Also, I'm throwing a TV show into this episode, so we're gonna mix it up a little bit. We're gonna start adding shit, because it's review everything, not review every movie. We literally are reviewing everything on the show, and that's a guarantee. I'm gonna get through every single thing ever made. Every book, every game, every movie, every TV show, every food brand, everything. I'm gonna review clothes. I'm gonna review people. I'm gonna review cups that you put your coffee in. I'm gonna review headphones. I'm gonna review every single fucking thing in existence, and I'm gonna do it while only releasing 4 episodes a year. I think it's plausible. I'm also only gonna tackle like 12 things per episode, but I think we'll get there eventually. You know, it's all just it's all about persistence, really. So first up, we have America, the motion picture. Dumb. Very, very dumb, but kind of funny at the same time. I actually found myself laughing quite a few times watching this movie, and I really like the animation style too. It stands out. It's different from a lot of the stuff that gets released, and I appreciate that. I appreciate a different looking animation style. Some of the action scenes that were made in this movie were really well made, and a lot of fun to watch. Very energetic, very expressive movie. I like it a lot. The art style kind of reminds me of something like Archer, but with the animation, like budget of a movie, it looks a lot more crisp and clean, and I really like the aesthetic of the movie. However, a lot of the issues I have come from the writing. One, just story-wise, it's nothing amazing, it's fine. I know a lot of people say, oh, if it's a comedy, story really doesn't need to be the most important thing. But I'm kind of gonna argue it matters a little bit. It's easy to say that it's not important, but you know, okay, like I love Hot Rod, that movie makes me laugh, and the story is very weak in that movie, but it's just the jokes throughout are really funny to me, and that's why I enjoy that movie. But I mean, I'm gonna give more props to something like the Cornetto trilogy, or South Park Bigger, Longer, Uncut, where it's like very funny movies, but also really well written stories to go with them. I'm not gonna say that every single comedy has to have a good story with it, but certainly going to give props to the ones that do. But also, just a lot of the comedy doesn't work in this movie either, and I know just before I said I laughed at it, but yeah, I did. There was still a lot of parts that I also really cringed hard at. First of all, this is a movie where it's taken a lot of different historical figures and making them into like wackier characters, which is kind of funny to see at first. But then you have stuff where it dives into the most predictable stuff ever. Like, yes, it's going to be a very political movie with its humor. So, you know, they have an Indian character. So what jokes do you think they're going to make about that character? It's going to be about a bunch of white people stealing his land, and they're going to make that joke on loop throughout the entire movie. Oh, they turned Thomas Edison into a woman, and oh, it's a woman inventor. Can you guess what type of jokes they're gonna make about that throughout the entire movie? It's not like these things are off limits just because people have made jokes about them before. It's just that, man, you're really doing every single predictable thing ever. A high school student could write these jokes. It's just the most generic stuff that you would think to make fun of. I will give props to the fact that it's a either 2020 or 2021 movie about America that does not have a single Trump joke in it from what I can remember. So it gets props for that. Again, not saying you can't make fun of Trump. He is one of the easiest people to make fun of. But a lot of people did it the last 4 or 6 years. And a lot of it was really try hard and unfunny. And this movie has a lot of jokes like that. It's making the same jokes that everybody has already made for a really long time. And then when it does something fucking ridiculous, it makes me laugh. When it has like a shot where you see what Abraham Lincoln looks like without his hat on. When you have like this big endgame battle at the end that they're trying to write off as a real battle that happened in history. The fact that the movie is about George Washington avenging Abraham Lincoln's death, and at the beginning of the movie it says based on true history. Like, stuff like that is great. There are a lot of funny moments in the movie. But whenever it's trying to give some sort of commentary, it's just the same shit in the most basic way possible. But to be fair, the movie does seem to know how stupid it is. It definitely is kind of playing up the let's just make a really dumb and fun movie angle, which is a good thing. I just wouldn't be able to give it a lot of props. Like, I remember a lot of people giving props to the movie Sausage Party when it came out, saying, oh, the commentary is actually really clever. No, it fucking wasn't. That was also the most basic shit you could say, too. I liked that movie. I know a lot of people hate it. I liked that movie because of the dark aesthetic that it had. I liked that it was like basically this horror movie about a bunch of food trying not to get eaten. Like, they learn the truth and it's horrifying. But I wasn't laughing at any of the commentary, and I wasn't laughing at the word fuck that movie seemed to love a lot. And so does this movie. I know I might be coming off as a bit of a hypocrite right now because I say the word fuck all the time in videos, but the reason I say fuck all the time is because it's just part of my vocabulary at this point. I said it so many times growing up that the word has zero meaning to me at this point. I can't help saying it. It's just natural to me. If I'm ever writing a script, the only way I'm throwing the word fucking constantly is if I'm trying to write a character like myself that just the word has no meaning to them anymore. They're completely desensitized to the world, or to the word. They're just completely desensitized to the word. This movie seems so fucking proud of itself every single time it says the word fuck. Like, yeah, we're an animated movie and we're saying fuck. There are lines in the movie where the punchline is they added the word fuck to a normal sentence.
Uncle Sam, I like it. Uncle fucking Sam. Come on, Uncle Sam.
It's so annoying. I hate that shit so much, and so many movies do that. So many sketch comedians do it. Just throwing in the word fuck, it makes it funny. Again, I know I say it all the time, but when you're writing a script, you can make the conscious decision not to throw it in. I don't know. That's a pet peeve of mine. The word fuck isn't inherently funny. It's not even edgy anymore. Everybody fucking says it. It's gonna be on Nickelodeon one day. You're gonna hear SpongeBob say it one day, I swear. But even with all of that, it was kind of fun to watch. I don't regret watching it, and I'd recommend it if it looks entertaining enough to you. Like, watch a trailer, watch a clip, make your own decision on whether it's something worth putting your time into. I don't regret it. Never watching it again, but I don't regret watching it the first time. Cool Cat Saves the Kids. This movie is made by Derek Savage, and it really taught me a lot. I don't know where I would have been without this movie. This was actually a movie night pick. Matt picked this. And yeah, just great time. Great time. Kudos to Derek Savage. He needs to keep making children's movies. We should all be supporting his work, because he's truly one of the brilliant minds of this generation. And I think that he deserves more recognition than he's given. Show it to your kids, please. I think it's going to teach your kids a lot of valuable lessons. And he also has gun self-defense for women, so if you're a woman who needs to, learn how to defend yourself, you can watch Derek Savage explain it to you. And I think that would be the best approach for anyone, really. Yeah, this is a perfect movie. There's nothing wrong with it. Archie's Final Project. It's actually called My Suicide on Netflix. And then it's also called Archie's Final Project. I could assume that's just some people don't want a video on their streaming service called My Suicide. But Netflix was cool with it. Archie's Final Project, it's weird. It's weird because there's parts of it that I kind of like, and there's parts of it where I'm like, this is a really obnoxious movie and I don't like what it's doing. I think it does some stuff near the end in that bugs me a little bit. I'll spoil it in a second. I'll add the spoilers tag to this one. Obviously, if you're going to make a movie about suicide, you need to handle it very carefully. And this movie is very edgy about it, but it also kind of makes sense because it's coming from the perspective of a high school student. It's literally you're watching a high school student's movie that he made. which is kind of weird because throughout most of the movie, it feels like you're watching his movie, you're seeing things from his camera's perspective, you're seeing things from the edits he does on his own time, but then just randomly throughout the movie, it'll cut to a point where it's like, okay, there's no way this is a scene that he's filming right now. It's not. This is just something that's happening. And it picks the most random points to do it, so I don't think it's the most well-edited movie. I think at times it's actually pretty well put together, but I think there's just a few scenes where the film decides to break its own rules and its own logic, and it just doesn't work. But in terms of how they handle such a sensitive topic, I get their approach, and I'm not necessarily the one who can determine if it's healthy or not. I'm not a mental health expert. From my perspective, what they show is they kind of glorify it a little bit throughout the first 30 minutes of the movie, or the first half of the movie. They're having this character like hype it up. You do see other characters criticize this decision. You do see characters tell him why what he's doing is really bad and unhealthy. But then it all kind of feels like it's a setup to tell you how bad of a thing it is, how much you will very likely regret the decision if you were ever to do it. And I kind of respect the approach, because it's kind of like getting on someone's level and trying to understand where they're coming from, where they would be thinking like this, and then now that they've got you, now that they've got your attention, show you why it's a really bad thing to do, show you why you shouldn't do it. It does it with a sense of humor, but it also does it while showing the drastic measures that something like this can have. But with that being said, I could imagine a lot of people watching this movie and not enjoying it. I think it's interesting. I like some of the scenes. I think the acting is kind of some of them are good, some of them are not great. Really like the scenes between our main character and the therapist. Those are my favorite parts of the movie. There's actually some cool animations thrown into there, and just the conversation between the two is fun to listen to. It's interesting to listen to. The stuff with him and the girlfriend, I wasn't really into that, and that's what takes up most of the movie. It seems like it's really just trying to dramatize something like this in a obnoxious way. And there's a fake out at the end that just seems like a really immature thing to do when covering a topic like this. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a mental health expert. I don't always know what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. I would never take on a project like this. I think you really need to be sensitive with something like this. I understand the approach of this movie, and I think parts of it are interesting to watch. I think parts of it are entertaining, and I think that it kind of pulls off its message in the end. I understand what it's going for. I think there are people who will probably really like this movie, and I think there are people who probably really hate this movie. I'm kind of in between, but I'm going to say I'm more on the positive side than the negative side, but it's just one where it's like, I don't think I could recommend it to someone. I don't think I could recommend it to a friend of mine, because I would have no idea what they'd think of it. I'd say purely if you are curious, check it out. You might like it, you might hate it. Robots. This was actually Zach's pick for movie night. When I was a kid, I heard that this movie was made by the same people who did Ice Age, and I loved Ice Age, so I got it on DVD. I was so excited to watch it. I took it out within 20 minutes. I did not like Robots, but I didn't really give it a fair chance either. Zach said he really remembered liking it as a kid, and he just wanted to rewatch it. He just wanted to revisit it, so we picked it for movie night, and it's cool. I think in terms of an animated movie, it has a style that stands out. Again, that's something that I like. There's kind of a simplicity to it with it just being a bunch of robotic parts, but there's also a lot of detail that they throw into it with it as well. Like, yeah, it's a lot of basic shapes that they're able to work with in this movie, but there's a lot of them. There's a lot of moving pieces, and definitely a lot of passion can be seen within the animation. There's some sequences in this movie that are genuinely really well done and a lot of fun to watch. I do think the movie is like pretty consistently entertaining up into a point where they introduce Robin Williams' character, and no disrespect to Robin Williams, he is great. I think this movie wasn't giving him a ton to work with. It was pretty, I don't know, maybe it was, maybe it's fine for little kids. I'm sure a lot of little kids liked the character. I feel like something like the Genie kind of holds up even when you get older. He's still a lot of fun, very energetic character to watch. And I think a lot of people tried to kind of capitalize off of that after Aladdin was such a huge success. When they had Robin Williams play a character, of course they're going to have him do impressions. Of course they're going to have him act really crazy. He's absolutely going to be the comic relief. But I think we're in something like Aladdin, the Genie is the comic relief, but he's also the heart of the entire movie. He's not just there to make jokes. There's some really heartwarming and great scenes between him and Aladdin in that movie. and I think that helps it stand out a lot. Where in this one, he's just kind of annoying. Again, as a kid, I probably would have liked him, but as an adult, he's just kind of annoying. But yeah, I'm an adult talking about a kid's movie right now, so there you go. That tells you everything you need to know. Definitely, but I definitely can say that there's other kids' movies that are better than this one. And it's not just Robin Williams that takes it down, it's just like our main character's interacting with this group of robots, and that section of the movie where he's just part of this like band of misfits is not nearly as entertaining as the beginning. In the climax, it starts to get kind of interesting again, although they do throw in a love interest absolutely out of nowhere. Like, they have one interaction together, and then they're just a love interest at the end of the movie. But, all in all, it's a fine kids movie. There's nothing seriously wrong with it. It's just not one that I think stands the test of time in terms of, like, age. Like, you'll like it more when you were a kid than you will when you're an adult. And yeah, that's about all I could say about robots. Casablanca, I actually watched this movie because of my podcast with Matt, Hollow Victories, on Matt's channel. And I watched it because we did an episode on Barbed Wire and Tank Girl, and he recommended that I watch Casablanca before Barbed Wire, because Barbed Wire basically uses a lot of the blueprint of Casablanca for its own story. And yeah, it absolutely does. Barbed Wire is not a very good movie. I did not like it that much at all. Casablanca is a fucking masterpiece. It's as good as everyone said it was. I have a hard time getting into older movies. Like Citizen Kane, I'd like to revisit it one day, but I watched it twice when I was in high school because I was trying to appreciate it, because I was trying to be like this film student, and I really wanted to like Citizen Kane because I felt like I was supposed to like Citizen Kane. And while I absolutely acknowledge how much of a monument that movie is and how much important stuff it did, and how, you know, as everybody says, it was a movie that was way ahead of its time, that's true, and I can acknowledge that, and I can appreciate the techniques, and I actually think the story of how it was made is more interesting than the movie itself, but I just can never get into Citizen Kane. And I started to see this pattern with a lot of old movies where I would try checking them out, and it was just like, man, I just think they don't stand the test of time for me. I think you can appreciate them, but I'm just not into older movies. And Casablanca shut me up because I fucking loved it. I thought it was fucking outstanding. It's not the only old movie that I like. I like Stagecoach. I like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I can name some older movies that I like. But this one is the first one where it's like, oh my god, this is beautiful. This is just as good as everybody built it up for me over the years. There's a lot of really engaging characters in it. It's extremely well shot. There is so many lines, so many famous lines that I didn't even realize came from this movie. I swear to God, like almost any scene in this movie has a line that can be quoted, that you've heard quoted somewhere else. Some of them I knew were from this movie. Some of them I had no fucking idea. I had no idea the fucking food fight was stealing from Casablanca. It is an awesome movie, and if you want to hear me go into more detail, you can hear me go into it in the episode of Hollow Victories I did with Matt, because there's a lot of comparing it to Barbed Wire, which may seem like an unfair comparison, and one of the most beloved movies to a Pamela Anderson comic book movie, but the people who made Barbed Wire did intentionally put them in a position to be compared to Casablanca, so I say it's earned. But yeah, really great movie. People are not, in my opinion, people are not exaggerating how great it is. I love Casablanca. Awesome movie, 10 out of 10. Then for another movie night, we actually watched a show over the Garden Mall, because all the episodes together, it's like movie length, it's a little mini series. And I watched this once all the way back when it came out, and I loved it. I watched it again a few years ago for a friend, and I loved it, and I watched it yet again, still love it. There is like one or two episodes that are a little Greg heavy that I would put lower on the list. Like it's the Schoolhouse episode and the Dream episode. The Schoolhouse episode has some really good laughs in it, though. I do enjoy that one. And then the Dream episode, I really love the ending of it. I think those two, it's just like where you're kind of hitting the layers between something that kids and adults can enjoy and something that's a lot more child-friendly. Although, again, the ending of that Dream episode, I would say, is a lot less child-friendly. And it's not to say that those two episodes are bad. It's just to say, I don't think it's a perfect show. I don't think every single episode is a banger, but most of them are. Most of them are really fucking good. It is a very creepy show. But it's also very, there's a lot of innocence to the show to go with the creepiness. There's a lot of really fun and creative designs for the characters. There's a lot of fun ideas for the story. It's probably my favorite one being with Tim Curry as Auntie Whispers. That one is just, in terms of writing, I think the most fun side story of the series. My favorite episode's the finale, just because it's such a fucking killer finale. It wraps everything up, I think, in the most perfect way possible. Over the Garden Wall is by no means my favorite show, but I think in terms of a finale, I think it has one of the best, if not the best finale I've ever seen for a show. I think it just knocks it out of the park with the last episode, and I think that if you watch the show and you enjoy it, you can take a lot of comfort in knowing that the final episode is just going to be as perfect as it possibly could be. Everything about it, the atmosphere of that episode, the animation, the music, especially the fucking music in that final one, it is just outstanding. We were getting close to Halloween, so we checked that one out for a movie night. We actually have another Halloween one that was recommended for movie night coming up soon. And yeah, my friend Mitzi says that they watch it every single Halloween, and it's absolutely one that's worthwhile of that. It does get really creepy too. I appreciate that. It's a kid show that's covering like horror, so most of the time those go pretty light. I'd say this hits fucking Courage levels though of how dark it gets, and not every episode's like that. Again, the Schoolhouse episode, really fucking innocent, really like just bright and colorful. But then again, something with like Auntie Whispers, or even the first episode for that matter, it gets really creepy, it gets really unsettling, and they get really fun with the designs. I love the fucking pub episode too, with that really weird fisheye animation dance. But just like all the characters in that pub are a lot of fun. That one stands out a lot. I mean, really every single episode's great though. The one with the mansion and Fred the horse, that one's also just excellent. It's such an excellent show that I think just every single idea that they had for it, every single episode stands out really well. And there's not a single one that I think is bad. I don't think it's flawless, but I think it's pretty damn close to flawless, and I love this show a lot. Then it was my turn for movie night, and I picked Upgrade because I wanted to watch it again. Honestly, my memory of this movie was the first 20 to 30 minutes of it are pretty rough, and then it gets really good, and then it gets fucking awesome. Like, if the whole movie was as good as, like, the second and third act, it would be a higher score for sure. Probably like an 8 or a 9. But I do think it has a bit of a rough and cliche start. Granted, something that my friend Chris, who joined us for this one, actually Chris started joining us for movie night and eventually got his own pick, which we'll get to soon. But as he pointed out, there actually is like this really nice scene in the first act where the character is kind of coping with something that horrible that just happened to them, and you see this breakdown scene with them. And it is one of the most realistic breakdowns I think I've ever seen in a movie, where a lot of movies where a character is grieving will have a dramatic way of portraying it. I think this one just has this one quick 20-second moment where he's getting his hair cut by his mom, and then it just out of nowhere, he just starts fucking bawling. And I think the way that they did it was pretty effective. I agree with Chris, that was actually a really great moment. Then, when the character STEM is introduced, again, 20 or 30 minutes into the movie, fucking excellent. The cinematography of this movie stands out as its own thing. It's doing some really cool stuff with the camera. The action scenes are outstanding. The first action scene you get in this movie when STEM is like first in his head is fucking outstanding. So much fun to watch. And the story just continues to go in an interesting direction. I love the ending of this movie. It kind of fakes you out thinking it's about to do something horrible that no movie should ever do. And then no, it's more horrifying than you could ever imagine. I love the score to this movie a lot. The character STEM, I think, is what kind of saves it. But even the main character becomes more interesting once he's interacting with STEM. So STEM is kind of the character that saves the film, but it had a lot of potential before STEM was in it, but it was just kind of potential. And then once you throw in this one missing piece, it's fucking outstanding movie. I like it a lot. This is Spinal Tap. We were back to Matt's turn for movie night. And yeah, I really like this movie. I actually did not know the impact this movie had. I didn't know a lot about it at all. Apparently, I mean, this is like, from according to what Matt said, like a bunch of bands that said, yeah, this is exactly what our story is like. Like a lot of this stuff is accurate. And also, apparently this movie has inspired a lot of sayings, like, oh, this is a Spinal Tap moment, where it's like a band is playing something and then they have an accident on stage that they have to try to play off as intentional. That's a Spinal Tap moment. Matt would be so much better at talking about this movie than me, but from my perspective, really liked it. When we started watching it, Matt didn't tell me anything about it, and I was for like a second thinking, like, is this just a documentary? Is this just like actually a documentary about a band that I'm not familiar with? And then they start talking about how they keep losing their drummer from spontaneous combustion, and it's pretty funny. So I was just like, okay, no, this is a mockumentary. And yeah, it's a really good mockumentary. There's solid music in it, very, very comedic music at some points with what their songs are about. But there is some they're damn good performers. I couldn't believe that there was fucking Chuck from Better Call Saul in this. It took me a long second to recognize him, but yeah, fucking Chuck in a metal band. Holy shit. There's a lot of very funny commentary on the music industry and just the entertainment industry in general. I love when they're trying to come up with a new idea for their cover album art because their cover was considered sexist. But then the Beatles' White Album's really popular, so then they just make an album that's like the color black and nothing else. That was really funny. Yeah, honestly, just a ton of memorable and funny scenes in this movie. High recommendation for me. I really loved it. In terms of mockumentaries, definitely one of the better ones. Do you ever look slightly cross-eyed when I'm looking at myself like this? I should be looking at the lens right there, but sometimes I look at myself on the screen while I'm talking, and then it's like I'm just staring at nothing. I look dead inside. But if I'm staring at the lens there, it looks like I'm talking to you guys. It's fucked up. It's fucked up, man. Man on the Moon, the Andy Kaufman movie. Funny enough, I actually did see the Jim and Andy movie on Netflix years ago, as it was recommended me for Duckcast. This movie was Chris's recommendation for movie night, and it's a movie he actually hadn't seen, but he wanted to see. Chris has been shown up to our movie night enough times to where we gave him a pick, so you'll start seeing some Chris recommendations on here too. So Andy Kaufman, we take a look into his life and his career. We take a look into some of the more controversial things that he did, some things that you probably couldn't get away with doing in today's age, and probably for good reasons, to be honest. But they do show this person who just really cared only about his act. He didn't care about making money. He didn't care what people thought of him. He didn't care about his reputation. He cared exclusively about his act. He cared exclusively about his craft. And as a result, a lot of people have respect for this man, and I get that. I can definitely understand that. And I do think while this movie does paint him in a bad way throughout a lot of it, I get the endearing side of him too. I truly do get the endearing side about this person. And I understand what the point of his really controversial act that this movie spends a lot of time focusing on, probably a good 30 minutes of the movie, which was the wrestling bit. I do get what the point of that was. It's building yourself up as the shittiest person imaginable only to get your ass beat at the end of it, making yourself the ultimate bad guy. And I think the film does a really good job of showing us the sequence of events, of showing us like the highlights, the most notable moments of this guy's career, at least to my knowledge. I'm not an Andy Kaufman expert. I think my favorite scenes of this movie take place near the ending where he gets his cancer diagnosis, and I know that's kind of a depressing thing to call my favorite part, but the reason I liked it so much is just because you have all these characters who are just like, yeah, fuck you, Andy. they don't trust him at all. He's built up this like reputation for himself where literally no one can tell if it's a bit or not until he's almost dead, until it's just like there's no denying it. And it kind of shows a consequence to his actions. But this movie does a really good job of showing the good and bad that can come out of doing an act like this. It does show that he was remembered fondly. It does show that there was a lot of people who really appreciated his craft. Just the fact that this movie exists shows that there was a lot of people who appreciate his craft. But it also shows how people will turn on you when you have this type of behavior. And it will also show how people will, maybe rightfully so, not want to be associated with you after stuff like that. And it even shows how if you go, your entire life messing with people, when something really serious happens, they might not believe you. It's a cry wolf situation. And I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was a really interesting way to wrap up the movie. And I almost feel like I'm describing some of the stuff as if it's fictional. I understand that this movie is based on a real person, and I'm sure that while some of it was probably, written in a way like changed or dramatized to make the movie more interesting, or to make the movie flow better, I do think, for the most part, what we're being shown is true. So yeah, I really like this movie. Some of the main critiques I've heard about it is just they think it should have been weirder, they think it should have been crazier. They said that the film didn't match Andy Kaufman's craziness. And maybe I could see that. The only thing I will say is him literally like doing the credits thing and then stopping to say, okay, I was just making sure all of the people who don't get it were leaving, but you're here so you get it. That felt, from the character they showed in the movie, that didn't feel like something he would do. That felt like it was too self-aware for that character to do. But who knows? I really liked this movie. I'd recommend it. Borat. I actually kind of briefly mentioned this one in the last episode when talking about Bad Trip, just because I was kind of talking about how Bad Trip is a fun prank movie, but it's not one of the more meaningful ones, where I kind of use Nathan for you as an example. And I also used Borat as an example, despite not seeing it, just off of word of mouth. So now I'm here to confirm, yes, a more meaningful prank movie. Again, no disrespect to Bad Trip, it does what it set out to do and it's entertaining. Borat does have a strong point to it. I think that, unfortunately, some people misread it as just an offensive for the sake of being an offensive movie. But no, it's not really making fun of, like, I don't consider it to be a movie that's making racist jokes, but a movie that is making fun of racist people. Because he's going around in this character, and he is just getting the worst kind of people to say what's really on their mind. And it's a great way to say, like, oh, racism ended a long time ago. It's a good way to prove that wrong right here. It's a good way to, like, just show how how messed up some people still are, how flawed some people's beliefs still are. And I think it's really funny. I think it's sad to see the world like that, but the way that they expose it, it's done in a very funny way. And you know the people who are being shown on camera, the really despicable people, they're not getting anything good out of this movie, so don't worry about it. But yeah, it's a very funny character. It's very funny, like what you can get a person to say, what you can get it's unbelievable. And how you can kind of form a story around it too, because the story is pretty simple. Borat comes to America, he sees Pamela Anderson on TV, he wants to travel to California so he can meet her, but then it's like, okay, but then like the different interactions that he has of characters in the movie, real people in the movie, can lead into like a scene change later on, like the scene with him and the prostitute that he hooked up with. Because of how that went with her when they were filming, that led into a scene at the end where he reconnects with her and she's like in the village with him at the end of it. It's because of genuine interactions like that. Or that line near the beginning with the pause, not joke, like when he's talking about the one guy about humor and comedy, how he throws that line in back at the end during the Pamela Anderson scene. I think it's very clever. I think it's very thoughtful. I think it's very meaningful. I have not seen the sequel yet, but I plan on it. I have not seen Bruno yet, but I plan on it. And I just think that it's a very funny, good intentions and meaningful movie, and I really like it. Next up, we have Halloween, which was Matt's pick for movie night. Matt we switched turns around just because Matt really wanted to show a Halloween movie since it was around Halloween when we watched it. So we let Matt go again. And you know what? The acting isn't great. Some people are better than others. Like, it wasn't all bad. The acting was kind of hit or miss. The stabbing scenes, none of it looked real. It looked very dated. I understand it's like, oh, it's what they could do at the time. Aside from some corny performances, especially when someone's being killed, like that woman at the beginning of the movie does not sound like she's struggling. She does not sound like she is being killed. In the other scenes, at least you can argue, oh, they're being strangled, so they can't actually get a proper scream out, because if you can't breathe, you can't really scream. But yeah, the rest of the movie, aside from those details, is really good. I mean, the film, the way it is shot, has definitely inspired a lot of movies, a lot of horror movies, and the cinematography to this day still looks outstanding. It doesn't really scare me, but honest to God, a lot of horror movies don't scare me. The thing that really gets me is more like psychological horror. A horror movie can get me with a jump scare and startle me, but most horror movies, after it, I'm completely fine. I just kind of see it as fiction, so it's fine. If I'm like in a haunted attraction, that's more likely to actually scare me while watching a movie. Probably not. And in terms of like horror movies that have scared me, it's something like Midsommar, where there's more of like a psychological side to it. There's something like horrifying about the mental state of people and what it can lead to. With Midsommar, especially focusing a lot on cults and how people are kind of initiated into them. Whereas something like Halloween, where it's just pure evil character, I don't get too worried about that. At least not me personally. I understand there's fucked up people out there, and Michael Myers can kind of build on that fear, the fear of being, caught by like a serial killer or something. But while the scares don't do anything for me, the film, the craft of the film does do something for me. I really appreciate the way it's shot. I really appreciate the techniques it created. I really appreciate the shots where so many of the shots are framed as if someone is watching them, where it'll be like a kind of a camera, or the camera's like far back and following the people walking around. You can still hear their conversation normally, but the way it's framed, it's almost like you're like eavesdropping on them, you're spying on them as the scenes are taking place. A lot of the nighttime scenes where characters are just driving around and their lights can only show so much of what's around you can kind of create a bit of a unsettling feel to it, because you don't know what's going on, but it's a horror movie, something could pop out at you. And yeah, just the way that they accomplish the light in a lot of the scenes really work. Seeing a guy in a creepy mask from a distance staring at you can be really unsettling. I think the only thing that hurt me with that is just, it took me a really long time to watch this movie, because this is the first time I've seen Halloween, believe it or not. And I've seen Michael Myers in so many things, and it's mainly parody, it's mainly comedy. So that's the only thing. I think if I would have seen this movie for the first time without ever seeing Michael Myers, that would have creeped me out a lot more. But just looking at the movie, looking at the way they frame the shots, I can see that it would be very effective, especially at the time. Just seeing someone with a creepy mask on, with just black, blank eyes staring at you from a distance, it could get you. It could get you. It's definitely a movie that I think in more than one way holds up. There's some things that don't hold up about it, but enough of it holds up to where I still think even to this day it's a great movie. And I'll just to quote my friend Matt from something he said last night, there are a lot of people who will like comment on like, oh, it's so cliche, not realizing that Halloween kind of created these cliches, so they were not cliche in the movie Halloween. Also, that score is just one of the most memorable things ever. I mean, I swear to God, every Halloween you'll just like, I remember as a kid, even as an adult, when I delivered fucking packages around Halloween time, you just go into someone's front porch and you just hear the fucking Halloween theme playing. It is just one of the most iconic horror themes of all time, and I think it has earned that status. Finally, I wanted to end this by talking about The Book of Henry, which is a Hollow Victories movie we watched. I'm, for the most part, not going to cover Hollow Victories movies on the show just because I'm already going into so much detail on Matt's show, and I don't think I'm going to go into more detail on this show. But for some reason, I just really wanted to talk about this one again, because it's such an interesting movie to me. I think it is the most interesting one that we watched on Hollow Victory so far, where it's like, there's so many pieces there, like where it's like, there's an idea here, there's something here. It just misses so badly that it takes this movie about a kid dying of like fucking cancer. You see the scene, he has an on-screen death, you see him die, and then it turns into a murder plot with all of these dark subjects. Because of how badly it misses the mark, it turns into a comedy. It turns into one of the funniest comedies I've seen in a long time, and that is so clearly not what it's supposed to be. The movie has a sense of humor that's intentional throughout many scenes, but it's just, man, it missed. It had an idea. It's doing stuff that I've never seen in any movie before, and I can give it props for that. I even have a little bit of respect for this movie, but it misses so badly. It's weird too, because there's some really good actors in this movie. I think the acting for the most part was fine. I'm not really big on Bobby Moynihan, although he doesn't have a big character, or Sarah Silverman. I'm not too fond of them per se. But, Naomi Watts does fine in the movie. The kid who's playing Henry, he's a good actor. He was in It. Yeah, really, no one was that bad. The other kid actor was even fine for the most part. It was just scenes where he had to cry where it didn't really work. But, You know, I'm not going to blame that on a freaking kid. I'm going to blame that on a director not getting a kid who's capable of crying on screen. That's going to be very difficult for a kid to pull off. Even Dean Norris is fine. I mean, Dean Norris is kind of a typecasted actor. He's normally going to play a cop. You can kind of make him a complete irredeemable piece of shit like he is in this movie, or you can make him a little bit more complicated like he is in Breaking Bad. But he's normally going to be typecasted, but, you know, for the role, he wasn't a bad choice. He's believable as this character. The cinematography for the movie looks nice. There's some good sets in this movie. There's occasionally a weird choice of a shot, but there's some that are actually really impactful. And I actually think the scene where they kind of axe Henry off, I think it's really well done. I think if the entire movie was good, that scene actually would have worked really well too. That's like the one scene in this movie where it's like, this kind of works. This is actually genuinely a heartbreaking moment, and it was treated with the integrity that it should have had. The shots for the scene are really well done. The emotions are there. It's just, Henry's not a well-written child character at all. And I think the point is he's kind of supposed to act more adult than most of the adults in the movie. But there's got to be a level, there's a limit where it just becomes too unbelievable, where he, like, a child prodigies, they exist, but they're normally good at one or two things. Like, they might be more intelligent than most kids their age. Maybe they can play a musical instrument really easily, or it just kind of came naturally to them. But this kid literally can do anything, and when he's given his diagnosis from the doctor, he knows more about it than the fucking doctor. He just starts listing everything, and it's just like, you can't make him this perfect. There's really no personality to him then. You gotta throw in some flaws. You gotta have some level of believability to this. Because you're not making a fantasy movie here. You're not making like a weird, oh, anything can happen in this movie. No, this film is grounded in reality, but this character is just unbelievable up to the point where it's comedic. There's a very creepy scene between the kid and Sarah Silverman's character that's supposed to be charming. It's just, he is not written well. Then the kid playing him, I think, is giving it his all, and I think with a better script, it would have been a fine performance. He's talking about more like your own mortality in the beginning of the movie, and you almost feel like I knew this in this movie he gets cancer and died. I already knew that going into the movie, just from spoilers throughout the years. But you kind of get the idea from the opening scene that he already had his diagnosis, and he's like preparing for the end to come, because he's talking about everybody's own mortality and stuff like that, and talking about, you know, you have to enjoy your time here and make it meaningful. But no, this is just the shit he talks about on a normal day, because the diagnosis comes in later in the movie. It's not a good script. And it's a script with an idea. It's a script that I respect. I actually do have a lot of respect for this movie, and the one we paired it with on Hall of Victory, Serenity. It's clearly someone's baby. It's clearly a movie that someone cared about. It missed. I know I keep saying that. It missed. And it missed so badly that I can't take a single thing about it seriously, and I was laughing my ass off while watching it. Props for the attempt. This was not an easy story to write, but I think there's an idea there, and I think with a better director and a better writer, something could have come out of it. I think no matter how you look at it, the setup for the movie is a little silly, so you would need to go in a more comedic way to make it work, but I do think you could make it work. But, you know, hell, it does work as a comedy. It just doesn't work as a comedy on purpose. I really love the Book of Henry. I will be rewatching this one. It's just sadly not for the reason I'm sure the director would have liked it to. I think they tried their best, and they made something that stands out, and it can be pretty heartbreaking to have something that you cared about this much just get completely shit on, which it did. I do have, like I said, I do have a level of respect for it, though. And I can say thank you to the director for creating a truly unique experience. But yeah, it's rough. It's really rough. I recommend it as a so bad it's good movie. Oh, well, that's all for this episode of Review Everything. Okay, bye.